Modern day life does not respect our mental health, and if there is anyone who knows better about that, that would be Matt Haig. I have read a previous book of his called The Midnight Library, which has a very mental health heavy plot. Now I'm looking forward to another book of his coming out in May this year, which is The Midnight Train, which kind of follows a similar route, but rather than going down a kind of negative mental health plot line as your trigger, I think The Midnight Train is going to be more about perhaps an older or more experienced person going, what if, in terms of reconsidering maybe some of their life choices. However, that's still a few months away, and I knew I wanted to pick up another book of his. On my bookshelf, I had Notes on a Nervous Planet, and for our workbook club in January, I hadn't had a good time, firstly with trying to find a copy of I Know I'm in There Somewhere, but then also trying to read The Courage to be Disliked, and hoping it had the courage to be disliked, because it was. So, in the end, I started rummaging around my bookshelves, found my copy of Notes on a Nervous Planet, and decided that sounds perfect for the prompt. Now, I'm here to tell you why you need to read it as well. If you are looking for advice on aspects of modern day life that are triggers for negative mental health and want to look at ways in order to reduce or recognise those symptoms, then Notes on a Nervous Planet is going to be a very useful read. It's also really approachable, as it's a collection of short little essays that have been written by Matt by what feels like over a span of time, but in a good way. So it's an insightful book. It's useful, but it's also quite entertaining to read. I really had a good time with this book, and it's both functional as well as enjoyable to read. Now, this book is just over 300 pages. I think this particular copy is 306, so it's not a long read. And as I mentioned, it's written as like a collection of sort of short essays. So some of these pages are literally only kind of like half a page long. So very, very easy to read, very approachable, and consequently I read this within a few days. Now, it did help I had my book club deadline kind of looming, but very, very readable. That ultimately didn't really shape how I picked up this book, because I really enjoyed it. I was naturally picking it up anyway. So if you're looking for advice on stresses and how to set limits on these things to help with your mental health, or even just recognizing that some things aren't good for you and wanting to cut those out, then here's more on Notes on a Nervous Planet. The world is messing with our minds. What if there was something we could do about it? Looking at sleep, news, social media, addiction, work and play, Matt Haig invites us to feel calmer, happier, and question the habits of the digital age. This book may even change the way you spend your precious time on Earth. And that it does. So there are some particular elements of advice that I was already doing, but it goes to show that I was naturally doing this for a reason. So very useful advice, maybe also covering topics that I didn't necessarily attribute to having negative impacts on myself, but in hindsight, and obviously having read the book and how it's affected other people, I can now see why those things are problematic. And it maybe has changed how I approach things a little bit. As the synopsis indicates, this book covers a broad range of topics. Now, I expected the likes of social media to come up, as that's kind of well known to have a negative effect on people. And what I actually like is that I recently read a news article where I think the likes of Meta and other social media kind of content providers have been in court, and it's been recognised that software like this and, technology such as having like infinite scroll and that sort of stuff like that is causing addiction in young people. It's not the first book I have read on this topic. What's that book called? If you want to read more specifically about topics like this and the impacts on kids, then a book called The Anxious Generation is a solid recommendation. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Notes on a Nervous Planet. So yeah, we talk about a wide range of topics. Now, whilst I expected the likes of social media, I didn't necessarily think consumerism and the way we are constantly advertised at and have people competing for our attention would be something that would impact me. But actually, in hindsight, that makes total sense. Since reading this book, I've actually sort of gone through an exercise where I've deleted a load of my emails and unsubscribed myself from a load of lists. And actually, it's quite nice just not being bombarded all the time. So even down to little small changes like that, it's kind of a one-off action you can do. And it maybe doesn't feel like much, but it's definitely something I've benefited from since I've read this book. What's also really interesting about Notes on a Nervous Planet is that Matt Haig is sometimes brutally honest. He doesn't sugarcoat the fact that he has struggled with anxiety and depression in the past. And he is very honest and open about the, less positive times in his life where his mental health has maybe made him do things that he shouldn't have done, or where he has impacted other people. Obviously not intentionally, but he doesn't sugarcoat or kind of dress up or try to justify what's happened. Rather, he looks at it maybe a little bit more clinically and can hold his hands up to those things and say, yeah, this wasn't great. But actually, he turns that into something meaningful for us readers in that he talks about things that trigger his mental health and maybe tips that have helped him get out of ruts that he's been in the past. So, but it's the openness in this book that I really enjoyed. I think generally as people, we are maybe more inclined to try to justify ourselves or to change reality to fit what we want to perceive ourselves as. And I don't think that Matt has allowed himself to fall into this trap with Notes on a Nervous Planet. And obviously that is more helpful for us in the long run. Honesty is the best policy, always. And he has been very good at spelling out his difficulties, recognizing his flaws, but then doing so in a way that helps educate other people. What I've really enjoyed about the writing style of this book and the collections of essays within is that the short chapters are very readable. Even sort of the longest chapters are only a few pages each. I wouldn't say any more than 10, but equally some, like I said, are less than half a page. There are things like lists in here and things that Matt has quite clearly written down over the course of time as and when he's been thinking about these topics, maybe for his own reasons, but then they have been edited into this book and categorized almost, so they are written in a logical order and they all ultimately string together when you're considering a particular topic. So although it's definitely been written with Matt in different mindsets, and you can pick up on these different tones and you can tell they've not all been written at the same time, they come together in a cohesive way. Notes on a Nervous Planet is a short book. It's a pretty self-explanatory book, but I have kind of summarized my key takeaways from this book. But now the question is, have you read Notes on a Nervous Planet? Are you going to, based on this review, or is it something that you're looking to read already? If so, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book or want to read this book. And I obviously talk about books all the time. So I have shared other book reviews like Yellowface more recently, but also Beyond Redemption. If you want to see more on this, as well as get a feel for the other types of books I'm reading, the TBRs I set myself and monthly challenges, then subscribe to my channel so you can see more regular updates from me. So That's everything from me today on Notes on a Nervous Planet. I would love to hear from you on this book. Whether you've read it or want to read it, please let me know. Until then, bye for now.